I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday night at Rosso's, the fancy Italian restaurant downtown where Mark always ordered the same thing, grilled salmon, no sauce. I had been married to Mark for 15 years, and I thought I knew every version of him. The quiet version, the charming version, the fake version he showed his mother, Judith. But I had never seen the cruel version. The waiter was pouring wine when Mark stood up slowly, as if he had practiced the move. His chair scraped back. Judith smiled, that satisfied smile I had learned to hate over the years. Across from me, Mark lifted his glass like he was about to make a toast. "Laura," he said loudly, so the other tables turned to watch. "I'm done with you." Time moved strangely then. The words hung in the air like something toxic. I watched Judith's smirk spread wider. I felt the eyes of strangers burning into my face. The waiter froze mid-pour, wine dripping from the bottle. Everything was suddenly too bright, too loud, too real. I set down my fork carefully. I stood up, pulled out my chair, and said nothing at all. Silence was my weapon, though I didn't know it yet. The car ride home felt like sitting inside a freezer. Mark drove with his hands tight on the wheel, occasionally shouting about how I was dead weight and how he had been planning his escape for months. I listened. I noticed everything. "The house is mine," he said at a red light. "The money is mine. This marriage, it's over." He mentioned the refinance. He said, my future. He talked about how Judith had helped him set everything up perfectly. Each word was a brick he was laying, showing me exactly where the wall was. My heart was racing, but I kept my face calm. When we got home, he stomped upstairs to his office and slammed the door. I waited until midnight, then crept to our fireproof safe hidden behind the painting in the living room. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The deed packet was half empty. Mark had taken the important sections. My stomach dropped. I checked the county website on my laptop, searching through the property records with trembling fingers. What I found made me pause. The refinance wasn't processed correctly. Mark had made a mistake, a huge one. I closed my laptop slowly as I heard his footsteps coming down the hallway. He stopped in the doorway of the dark living room, silhouetted against the light from upstairs. "Why are you still awake?" he asked, suspicious. "Couldn't sleep," I whispered, and moved past him toward the bedroom. By morning, I had barely slept. My mind was spinning with numbers and dates and legal terms I didn't fully understand yet. I needed help, real help. I called in sick to my job at the accounting firm. Mark was already gone, probably at the office with Judith, planning whatever came next. I spent the morning researching real estate attorneys on my phone, my hands still shaking from coffee and adrenaline. I found Michelle Chen online. Her reviews were perfect, and something about her photo, serious eyes, strong jaw, made me think she wouldn't take any nonsense. I called and explained my situation in a voice so quiet I could barely hear myself. "Can you come in this afternoon?" she asked. I said yes, before I could change my mind. At 2 p.m., I sat in Michelle's office in downtown Boston, surrounded by law books and framed certifications. She listened to everything without interrupting. The dinner, the divorce papers, the missing deed, the refinance nightmare. Her expression never changed. "Your husband made a legal error," she finally said, leaning back in her chair. "A significant one. When he refinanced without you, the deed wasn't properly transferred. That means you still have legal claim to the property." Relief flooded through me like cold water. "You can petition to correct the deed," Michelle continued. "Legally, cleanly, his mistake is your leverage." Then she paused. Something flickered across her face. "Laura, I need to ask, do you know Judith Morrison?" My blood went cold. "That's my mother-in-law. Why?" "She has a reputation," Michelle said carefully. "About 5 years ago, she pressured an elderly woman, her husband's caregiver, into signing over property rights before he passed away. The family sued. She settled quietly." I understood then. Judith was a predator, and this whole plan, the dinner, the papers, the refinance, it was her playbook. I was just the latest target. Judith showed up at our house the next morning, letting herself in with her spare key like she owned the place. She found me in the kitchen making coffee. "We need to talk about your transition," she said, sitting down at the table without being asked. Her jewelry clinked as she moved. "To make things amicable, you should sign this quitclaim deed." She slid a document across the table. "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly. Judith's face hardened. Upstairs, Mark appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his pajamas. When he saw the deed, he knew what had happened. "What are you doing?" Mark demanded, his voice rising. "Just sign it. We can make this easy." "No," I said. "You don't understand," Judith hissed. "You're being irrational. The house is ours. You have nothing. No money, no options, no future without us." Her words were meant to crush me. They almost did. But I stood up, walked to the closet, and put on my jacket. "I have an appointment," I lied, even though my heart was hammering. "I'll be back later." "Laura," Mark called after me as I walked out the door. I kept walking. I drove straight to Michelle's office. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely steer. When I walked in, Michelle was already waiting for me. I had texted that I was on my way. "They tried to get me to sign a quitclaim deed this morning," I said, sitting down in the same chair as yesterday. Michelle nodded slowly. "That's good for us. It shows intent." "Can we file the petition?" I asked. "Right now, today." "Yes," Michelle said. She pulled out forms and began explaining everything in simple terms. I could petition to have the deed corrected based on the filing error. We had documentation. We had timeline. We had evidence that Mark had acted without my knowledge or permission. "How long will it take?" I asked. "Weeks, possibly months. But Laura, listen to me. Once we file this, things are going to get worse before they get better. Mark and Judith will panic. They'll try everything to pressure you into backing down. You need to be ready for that." I nodded. I was already ready. Michelle filed the petition that afternoon. As I left her office, I noticed a black car parked across the street. A silver sedan, the same one that had been behind me on the drive downtown. Judith was following me. My pulse quickened, but I drove carefully, following all the speed limits, watching the sedan in my mirror. That night I told Mark nothing. I made dinner. I acted normal. But everything had changed inside me. I could feel it like a switch had been flipped. I was no longer the woman who would be pushed around. I was building a case. I was building walls. I started collecting documents in secret. Old bank statements, emails, business receipts, Mark's tax returns, which he kept in a filing cabinet in the office. He had never bothered to hide anything from me because he never thought I would look. But I looked. What I found made me understand how deep the betrayal went. There were emails between Mark and a business partner named Dalton discussing how to transition Laura out before the end of the year. There were bank transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. There was a loan application with my signature, except I had never signed it. Fraud. He had committed fraud. I photographed everything with my phone, hands shaking, back against the locked office door, listening for his footsteps. I felt like a spy in my own house. That night, I opened a private email account that only I knew about. I sent all the photos to myself, making copies, building my safety net. A week passed. The county sent us a letter, addressed to both Mark and me. It was the official notice of deed correction. Our names were both still on the property, for now, but the filing error had been acknowledged. The correction would be processed within 30 days. Mark opened the letter at the breakfast table and went completely white. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice dangerous. I was making toast. I didn't turn around. "I think you know what it is." He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "You went to a lawyer, behind my back." "You went behind my back," I said calmly, finally turning to face him. "You took out a loan in my name. You refinanced the house without me. You planned to leave me with nothing. So yes, I went to a lawyer." For a moment, I thought he might hit me. His fists clenched. His face turned dark red. But then Judith appeared in the doorway. She must have been upstairs, and put a hand on his shoulder. "Not now," she whispered to him. She turned to me with a smile that looked like a shark's. Laura, we need to talk, just the two of us. Judith took me to the living room. She sat on the couch and patted the cushion next to her, but I stayed standing. You're being smart, she said, which confused me. You understand you have leverage. Good. That's exactly what we want to discuss. What do you mean? I asked. I'm going to make you an offer, Judith said. Sign over the house to us. Officially, quitclaim deed, clean and simple. In exchange, Mark will give you a settlement. Not much. You didn't really contribute to it after all, but enough to get by. No, I said. You're not listening. I'm offering you a way out, a clean break. You can start over without this mess hanging over you. No, I said again. Judith's smile disappeared. Then I'll tell Mark something that will destroy you. I felt my stomach drop. What? There's something he doesn't know about you, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Something that will make him hate you even more than he already does. Do you want to know what I'm talking about? I couldn't speak. Sign the house over and it stays secret. Don't sign and he learns everything. I called Michelle from my car in a parking lot, my hands still shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She's threatening to tell Mark something, I said. A secret. She said it would destroy me. Laura, listen to me carefully, Michelle said. Judith is trying to intimidate you into backing down. It's a tactic. Don't let it work. But what if? What if nothing? You don't owe her anything. And frankly, any threat she makes to you right now, we can use as evidence of coercion. Keep calm, document everything. Keep moving forward. I hung up, took a deep breath, and drove home. That night, I confronted Judith in the kitchen. Mark was upstairs. Tell Mark whatever you want, I said quietly. I'm not signing anything. Judith's face twisted with rage. She stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. You'll regret this, she hissed. No, I said, I won't. For the first time since this started, I felt powerful. The secret was worse than I imagined. Judith found me at work the next day. She walked into the accounting firm like she owned it and asked to speak with me privately. In an empty conference room, she told me everything. 3 years ago, she said, Mark took out a loan in your name, a business loan for $200,000. You didn't sign it. Your signature was forged. My stomach dropped through the floor. He used your credit, Judith continued. He never actually used the money, so the account just sits there, active, earning interest. You're legally responsible for a debt you don't even know about. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Because I want you to understand how powerless you are, Judith said. If you push this forward, we'll expose that loan. Mark will say you knew about it all along. Your career will be over. No one will hire you. You'll be ruined. She stood to leave. Wait, I said. Why would Mark do that? Because I told him to, Judith said, and smiled. I control everything in that family, and you need to understand that you can't win against me. I had never felt more terrified in my entire life. The fraudulent loan was real. Michelle had been right. Mark had committed fraud against me. But Judith's threat was real too. If they exposed it publicly, even though I was the victim, the damage would be catastrophic. I called Michelle from a parking lot again. The loan is real, Michelle asked, her voice sharp. Yes, a forgery. $200,000, active for 3 years. Okay, Michelle said calmly. Listen to me. This is actually good news. This is massive fraud. We can use this against them. And here's the thing, Judith just admitted to knowing about it, to threatening you with it. That's coercion. That's illegal. I didn't record her, I said. No, but I believe you. And her threat alone tells us she's desperate. Laura, this loan just became the key to everything. What do we do? I asked. We file a dispute on the loan immediately. We start a financial investigation into Mark's business. We document Judith's threat, and we don't back down. I spent the next week building my case, like I was solving the world's most important puzzle. I filed disputes on the fraudulent loan. I contacted the loan company and explained that my signature had been forged. I hired a handwriting expert with my own money, which terrified me, to prove the signature wasn't mine. I I gathered every email, every text, every piece of evidence that showed Mark and Judith's involvement. Michelle suggested we request a full financial audit of Mark's business. If he's done this to you, she said, he might be doing it to others. We need to look at everything. I felt like I was living two lives. By day, I went to work at the accounting firm and acted normal. By night, I was a detective in my own marriage, photographing documents, copying files, building walls of evidence. One email I found was between Mark and Judith. It said, "We need to move fast. If she finds out about the second loan, we're finished." A second loan. There was more. I searched the office for hours, but couldn't find evidence of a second loan. Instead, I found something worse. Mark's business was collapsing. Invoices marked unpaid. Emails from investors threatening legal action. Tax returns showing massive losses that he'd hidden. He had been planning to sell the house to cover his debts. That's why he needed me out. That's why Judith had orchestrated the dinner and the divorce papers. They were drowning financially, and I was their life raft. I sent all of this to Michelle, along with a note. "I think Mark's business is failing. Is that relevant?" Her response came within an hour. "Very relevant. This shows financial motivation for the fraud. It shows desperation. It makes the case stronger." That night I made dinner and watched Mark eat in silence. He was thinner than usual. Stress was aging him. He avoided my eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked casually. "Fine," he snapped. But it wasn't fine. He was falling apart, and I was documenting every moment of it. Then Dalton showed up. Mark was in the shower when someone knocked aggressively on our front door. I opened it to find a man in an expensive suit, his face red with fury. "I need to speak to Mark," he said. "Now." "He's upstairs," I said carefully. "Can I help you?" "You're Laura?" he asked. "Yes." "Then you need to know your husband has been lying to you, and to me for months." Mark came downstairs, still wet from the shower, and went completely pale when he saw Dalton. "What are you doing at my house?" Mark demanded, but his voice shook. "We need to talk about the Riverside contract," Dalton said. "Specifically, about how you quoted it at $500,000 when you knew the infrastructure costs were double that. You were going to take my investment and lose it deliberately. You were going to bankrupt me and blame it on market conditions." Mark's face went gray. "And apparently," Dalton continued, turning to me, "your wife had nothing to do with this. Did you know your husband was committing fraud?" I shook my head slowly. "Good," Dalton said. He pulled out a folder and handed it to me. "You'll want this." After Dalton left, I locked myself in the guest room and opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were receipts, dozens of them, all showing personal expenses paid from Mark's business account by Judith, designer purses, jewelry, a vacation to the Bahamas, spa treatments, tens of thousands of dollars. But that wasn't all. There were also invoices showing inflated charges to clients, charges that Judith had personally authorized, and bank transfers from Judith's personal account to offshore accounts I'd never heard of. Judith wasn't just his mother. She was his business partner, and she was stealing from him while he stole from his clients. I photographed everything in that folder and sent it all to Michelle. My phone rang within minutes. "Laura, listen to me," Michelle said. "This is bigger than a divorce now. This is criminal fraud. I'm referring you to a fraud attorney, and I'm filing an amended petition with the court. Everything changes now." Mark found the folder on the kitchen table the next morning. He went ballistic. He screamed. He threw it across the room, and papers scattered everywhere like snow. "Where did you get this?" he roared. "A business associate brought it to me," I said calmly. "He seemed to think I should know what you and your mother have been doing." Mark's rage crumbled into desperation. He sat down hard on the kitchen floor and put his head in his hands. "Please," he said, "please just give me the house. Let me sell it. I can fix everything if I just sell the house." He was crying now, actual tears, but I felt nothing except cold clarity. "No," I said. "Laura, please, I'm begging you, I'll give you anything. Just let me sell the house." "No," I said again. And I meant it. That afternoon, Michelle called with news. "I've filed for divorce on your behalf," she said. "We're taking the first strike. We're citing financial misconduct, fraud, and coercion. Mark will be served papers by end of day." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we let him panic, let him make mistakes, let Judith scramble, and we prepare for court." Mark received the papers at work. He came home furious but also broken. Judith arrived an hour later, and they had a screaming match in the backyard, so loud the neighbors could probably hear. "You let this happen," Mark shouted at her. "I was helping you," Judith screamed back. "By stealing from my business, by ruining me." I stood at the kitchen window and watched them tear each other apart, the predator and the weakling. Neither one had ever expected someone to actually fight back. The court ordered a full financial audit. Michelle had requested it, and the judge, a woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, had approved it immediately. Auditors descended on Mark's business like locusts. They looked at everything. They found everything. Judith tried to hide. She hired a lawyer and attempted to claim she was simply helping manage finances. The auditors didn't care about her explanations. They cared about the numbers, and the numbers were damning. Meanwhile, the deed correction went through. My name was legally restored to the property. I owned half the house, legally, officially, permanently. I received a letter from the county with my name on the deed. I read it 3 times, and each time, something inside me grew stronger. Judith's lawyer called Michelle, asking for a private meeting. "What do they want?" I asked. "To negotiate," Michelle said. "They're offering to drop all claims against you if you sign the house over." "Tell them no," I said. "That's what I thought you'd say." But Judith and her lawyer showed up at Michelle's office anyway, pushing past the receptionist and demanding to speak with me. Michelle called me, and I went downtown immediately. When I walked into the conference room, Judith looked like a different person. Her perfect hair was messy. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. She looked defeated. "We can make this go away," she said desperately. "Just sign the house over. That's all we're asking." I looked at her face, the face that had smiled while destroying me, and I felt absolutely nothing. "No," I said. I opened Dalton's folder and slid it across the table. "These are the crimes you've committed," I said quietly. "These are the people you've hurt, and these are the reasons I'm going to take everything." Judith's lawyer started to object, but I stood up and left. Mark's business collapsed within a week. The auditors found so much fraud that his licenses were suspended. His investors pulled out. His major contract was canceled. He was finished. At home, he was worse, packing angry then suddenly quiet, frighteningly quiet. Judith stopped coming to the house. She had her own legal problems now. The fraud allegations had spread beyond Mark's business. Someone was investigating her for elder abuse related to Mark's late father. I continued going to work. I continued being calm. I continued being untouchable. Then Mark tried something desperate. He had a real estate agent come to the house without telling me. They actually created a listing and posted pictures online. I saw it on my phone. Our house, photographed and available for sale. I called the agent immediately. "I'm the legal co-owner of that property," I said, "and I do not consent to any sale." The agent went silent. Oh no, Mr. Morrison didn't mention." "He can't sell what he doesn't own," I said. "Remove the listing immediately." The listing was down within an hour. Mark came home and found me waiting for him in the living room. "Did you really think you could sell the house without my signature?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just went upstairs and locked himself in the office. The courtroom was cold and formal. Everything happened the way Michelle said it would. Mark's lawyer argued that I was vindictive and trying to destroy his client's life. The judge looked unimpressed. I presented the documents, all of them, the forged loan, the fraudulent business practices, the inflated charges to clients, the offshore accounts. The personal expenses hidden in business accounts, every lie, every betrayal, every crime. The judge's face was stone. "Your Honor," I said, and my voice was steady as a rock. "I trusted this man with my life, and he spent 15 years stealing from me, lying to me, and planning to leave me with nothing. I'm asking the court to recognize that fraud and hold him accountable." Mark tried to cry. The judge didn't care. "Your accounts are frozen pending investigation," the judge said. "Child support, if applicable, will be determined. Spousal support is denied. The defendant is liable for the fraudulent loan." It took 15 minutes. Then it was over. The house sale went through 6 weeks later. Mark was forced to sell it to cover his legal fees and the fraud settlements. But I had purchased rights to buy it first at market value. I had enough money saved, money that Mark didn't know about, money I had been saving for exactly this moment. My lawyer helped me close the deal. The deed was processed, new papers were drawn up, and my name, Laura Bennett, was the only name on them. Just mine. For the first time in 15 years, something was entirely mine. Mark came to the house one final time to collect his things. I watched from the window as he loaded boxes into a moving truck. Judith didn't come with him. She was dealing with her own legal problems, facing her own consequences. Mark looked smaller somehow, defeated, like a man who had lost everything because he thought he was smarter than everyone else. He saw me at the window and stopped. Our eyes met for just a second. Then I closed the curtain. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my house, my actual house, my real house, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. The kitchen was peaceful. The house was quiet except for the sound of birds outside. No yelling, no lies, no predators circling. On the kitchen table was a framed photo, just one. It was me and my grandmother taken years ago. She was teaching me to bake. We were both laughing. "You can do anything you set your mind to," she used to say. I finally understood what she meant. I set down my coffee and looked around at what I had built, not just a house, but a life, a real life, built on truth and evidence and my own strength. The court documents were signed. The deed was registered. Mark was gone. Judith was facing criminal charges, and I was here alone, completely at peace. I had walked into that restaurant as a woman who trusted the wrong people. I was walking out as a woman who trusted herself. I changed the locks that afternoon. New keys, new rules, new life. When people ask me how I survived, I tell them the truth. I didn't survive. I won. And I did it by being smarter, stronger, and far more patient than they ever thought possible.